The Sock Jig Sneaker Podcast is casually hypnotizing and radiantly magnetic. Welcome to episode 76 of the Sock Jig Sneaker Podcast. I'm your host, Sock Jig. You can follow me on Twitter at SockJig and on Instagram and Blue Sky as well. I hope everyone had a good holiday. I had a great holiday. I got to spend some time with family and go to lots of dinners and see a lot of people. And so this episode has been a little bit delayed because of that, just doing things in between in a priority. So in this episode, I talk about the making of Sneaker of the Year lists and the criticism that they get, whether it be about semantics or panelists and who's got to say in what. And because it's all subjective anyway, my suggestion to anyone making Sneaker of the Year list is to just embrace the debate that comes with it instead of fighting it. So I end up talking about that. I talk about the issues that came up with the complex Sneaker of the Year list and the Beema Williams one as well too. I didn't talk about the Nice Kicks one because as I was recording this episode over the past week and a half or so, the winners were still being rolled out. And I was honored to be selected as one of the 100 panelists for Nice Kicks. And I originally planned on giving my ballot and reasoning on all my picks, but as you'll kind of see, it kind of went in a different direction entirely. So there's a couple other segments that I postponed. I had this segment idea that I've already postponed a few times that called How Sneaker Collabs Could Improve in 2025. And, you know, when I'm talking about collabs, I guess I can't call it a collab lab or anything like that. That might be trademark. Maybe I could call it like collab clinic or collab workshop with the sock man. Either way, I'm pushing it to the next episode, and that's where it'll be more a wrap-up of 2024 and what's coming in 2025. And I can also include a wrap-up of the Sneaker of the Year bracket tournament that I do, which is coming after this podcast goes out. Because really, when it comes to this sock jig stuff, I can only ever work on one thing at a time. The main topic is about criticism and fandom versus tribalism in the world of sneakers. And this is something I've been thinking a lot lately about how fandoms in other industries have been falling into these tribalistic wars. And we saw this with Drake and Kendrick and other places as well too. And it's just like the product of the modern digital age now, that if you criticize someone or some brand, then you may have to feud with all the super fans in that person's tribe or that brand's tribe. And so what is the state of criticism when it comes to fandom then, if everything is changing so rapidly? And so I talk through that. I talk about what we could do to counteract it. And by we, I mean sneaker fans as sneakerheads. And it's not intended to be about content creators, content creating, or influencers trying to get brand deals or anything like that. That kind of becomes tangential to it. It's just about the state of fandom in this changing digital age. There's also a special announcement from me in that segment, so it'll be an honor for me if you stay tuned for that and listen to as well too. So I hope you enjoy, but first, what's on feet, pickups, skips, and misses. On feet recently, I was in San Francisco for a work trip, and so I took my Travis Scott Fragment lows and I took my Tom Sachs Mars Yards 2.0, which is the first time I've been wearing those in a year plus. And, you know, usually I just pick the shoes that work with my fits, but it's also fun to flex on these kind of trips. And I usually save the GRs for home. And Fragment lows are been the shoes by my door. So I've been wearing those since the trip as well, too. And over this holiday break, I've been going to various Christmas dinners and Christmas parties. I've been wearing the Rick Owens low vintage, the Vans looking ones. Mine are suede. Also wore Cole Haan Fragment loafers and also wore reverse mocha Travis Jordan 1 lows to various dinners. And in between, I've been wearing the undefeated Humara toothpaste colorway, something light menta, I think it's called. In terms of pickups, I picked up the Cactus Jack CJ1 T-Rex, the dark mocha or whatever it's called. Shout out to friend of the show, Travis Scott and or Team Travis, as always. I finally got them in hand, and there's a big T-Rex sticker over the big Jumpman on the side of the box. And again, with the name change on this shoe, I can't even remember what it's called before, but now it's called the CJ1 T-Rex. I don't know if there's a legal thing with the word Jumpman. I don't know if someone else owns Jumping Jack or whatever, and there's a conflict. Or maybe Jordan Brand just didn't want to give Jumpman to a collaborator and wanted to keep it for themselves. I don't know. But This shoe is $200 retail and came out to like $237 shipped for me. And so I don't know if this shoe should be $200 retail. I feel like it should be a $180 shoe. It doesn't need the fancy box and the canvas bag that it comes with, but he's clearly their top collaborator, so they want to have some special shoes for him, not just the Travis 1 lows, which are always cheaper at $150 or so. And somewhat related, I also picked up the Travis Scott Velvet Brown and Dark Mocha Jordan 1 low. I think that's the full name that they're calling it. Once again, thank you to Travis Scott and or Team Travis, friends of the show. And I did a Mr. Brightside of the shoe, and some people sometimes don't always understand that it's a recurring bit that I do, and that the point of it is to just help people get over an L and just crack some jokes. And people will reply, someone is salty that they didn't get the shoe, and they will flex like a screenshot to me, and I just laugh. And back in the day, I used to just respond with, it's all right, you didn't get it, it just went over your head. But these days, I just explain nicely that it's just a bit to jokingly talk shit about a sneaker to help people get over the L. I'm excited to see what these actually look like in hand. It's kind of hard to tell what they look like in photos. I'm going to see what I can work with in terms of fits with this sneaker too, but I need to actually see how they actually look in hand and how they feel in hand. I also picked up the ALD 997 mismatch pair, and that was kind of random. I was thinking about it before the drop, where it was just kind of announced as a true quick strike, really. We haven't really seen this in a while, where it was teased on Instagram the night before, and then they announced that it was going to drop at 11 a.m. And I just lucked into these, really. I went to the site 5 minutes before the drop, and I was thinking, I'm like, I don't even know how to sock jig anymore. Like, a lot of these tricks don't even work anymore. So I was just going to raw dog it and see how it goes. That sounds gross, but you know what I mean. I was just going to, sit in the queue, and hopefully I'm in the early part of the queue. But once I logged in, I went to the new releases page, and they were already live. And so I clicked my size, and there's no queue. I went straight to checkout. Everything else is filled in. My credit card I have memorized anyway, so that didn't take long. And then boom, I got them. So, and even these shoes, they were $252 shipped. And so, I don't know, lately, I guess I've been feeling it a lot because the Canadian US exchange rate is a lot. These came out to like 360 Canadian, whereas a few months ago, earlier in the year, it might have been like 340 Canadian altogether. And the other thing about the shoes is there actually are two different SKUs on each shoe. One says ALD 9971 and the other one says ALD 9972. And then the box says ALD 997 all. So I'm assuming these are new production and they went through and like switched them all or did that in the factory or whatever. But I haven't seen New Balance do this before. I'm sure other brands have done this before. The other difference was the box doesn't smell floral. I remember the first drop, the yellow tongue pair and the pink tongue pair. When you open the box, it really did smell like flowers in there. So they didn't recreate that. So I don't know if that means that these are just sitting from the old drop or if they really are a new production. Most likely a new production. Kids of Immigrants Sundermax, I was able to pick up the purple pair. And this is my first EQL win. So I guess I'm not blacklisted. And I ended up getting a size 12.5, which is my ideal size in these Sundermax shoes. And during ComplexCon weekend, they dropped a few hundred pairs in person at ComplexCon in Vegas, but on GOAT app, they were available under retail. The purple ones only. The orange ones were all like $1,000. And I tweeted it out, and a bunch of people that I know were able to cop. I actually didn't cop because the size 12 was under retail, but the 12.5 and the 13 were all like $220 or $215 or something. And that was over retail. And I knew that a 12 wouldn't work for me just because I know that this silhouette is more like a women's silhouette. And with the zipper and everything, I'll probably have to size up. So I just skipped it out entirely. And I wasn't sure what was going on, why that sneaker was available for under retail early, if it was retailers just unloading early and thinking that the shoe might be a brick. And obviously it's not a good sign for the collaborator or the brand that when they're trying to generate hype at ComplexCon for this sneaker, and it's very limited at ComplexCon and sold out really quickly, that at the same time it's under retail on the app. So that's not going to be good for business, really. So at the time, during ComplexCon weekend, I think everyone thought that the orange pair was going to be exclusive and the purple one would go to retailers and to Sneakers app. But it's actually the opposite. It's the purple one that is exclusive and the orange one is going to Sneakers app. And they just announced that on their Instagram stories on Q&A just recently. So those early pairs that sold on GOAT were either going to be allegedly stolen pairs, or it was kids of immigrants themselves allegedly selling pairs that they have exclusive access to, or allegedly some third-party middleman. Again, that was all allegedly. Either way, I'm not judging. You've heard my How to Release a Sneaker Collab series. I talked about backdooring and why exactly it happens. So if that's what is happening, I get it. I understand. Money is a requirement for this kind of rollouts and stuff. But either way, the sneaker is definitely not under retail now. It's like at 300s or so. It popped to like 400s and 500s in some sizes, and now it's gone down a little bit as people are getting them in hand. And that's because the shoe is good enough where people want it. The hype is there. They want it in hand. They will pay over retail for it. And I was joking on Twitter that if you are a kid of immigrant and you are going to pay resale about it, what would your mom actually say if you did that? And there were some good responses on there, like, Mom, I'm just going to resell it anyways, or you wouldn't actually tell your mom what the retail price of it was anyways. I also wanted to talk about the Kids of Immigrant rollout that they had for the sneaker at ComplexCon and on their own release and on a sneakers app as well too, but I'm going to push that to the next episode. I also copped the New Balance 740, the new silhouette that they debuted with Concepts. I think it's not a collab, but probably an exclusive release for them. And this is a $120 mesh shoe that looks like it's set to compete with the ASICS 1130, which is that cheap and comfortable GR market that was a huge hit and dominating this whole past year. And, obviously every brand would love to have the next big GR hit. And I was thinking about this, and I was thinking about Nike doesn't really have that cheap and comfortable shoe in this market that is a mesh runner that's on trend. The closest they have is the Vomero, which is like 160 and so which doesn't really qualify. And of course they have the Nike Dunk and the Air Force One, which are kind of on their way out and not exactly the same kind of comfort level either. And then sure enough, the next day they announced the Nike V5 runner and like 4 more shoes that are priced at like $90 or $100. So clearly Nike sees this as like a big area that they need to get into. Obviously you can't have someone have the GR hit of the year and not have something that competes with it. So this New Balance 740 seems like New Balance's answer, because they do have some cheaper shoes that are in that range, like the 574, but those have been around a long time and have a certain stigma about them, whether they're outlet shoes or the Ross shoes or whatever. But it's a good idea to come out with like a new mesh runner type that can compete in this space. And you can see it on the shoe itself. It's got synthetic leather instead of real leather to hit that price point. So I don't know if it's going to be a hit for them, but I wanted to try this sneaker out, and it's only $120, so I thought I'd give it a go. I also copped the shoe that I was most looking forward to this whole year, which ended up releasing very late in the year, which is the Spiridon OG. And last time these came out was in 2016 or so as a quick strike, which were very limited. I remember putting a bid in a month or so later on StockX for $225, and then sure enough, someone actually took it the next day. I was shocked. And it turned out that size 12 that I copped was way too snug for my foot. This is more like a half size up if you have a wider foot. And then I could never find a size 13, and they weren't even like listed. Like that's how rare that 2016 drop was. So I'm looking forward to this one. I think it's a great old man shoe or unk shoe, or just a ball nowhere shoe. In terms of misses, I missed out on this hard copy Adidas BW Army shoe. I criticized that first drop as it was a botched release and they didn't really handle it on Instagram and stuff correctly. But this one they got right. They made it like this community code thing, and they released it to friends of that hard copy account. You basically had to go to the accounts that they listed and post a comment on their Instagram, and you would get DM'd a code, and then that code would unlock the sneaker for you to purchase on the Confirmed app. But it would also unlock further codes that you could share with your friends as well. And so they handled it really well. They included friend of the show Street Night Live with it. So I was really happy to see him involved and giving out codes to people. I was just a little bit late that day. I was busy with the work. And then by the time I saw it and realized it, the codes are gone for Canada at least. But I'm glad to see that they got the drop right and involved the community. So that's always nice to see. Also missed out on the Orally New Balance 990 V4. Those are both fire shoes, I think. They were teased like almost a year ago, so it would have been nice if they came out a little bit earlier. But they do look like a fall type of shoe, but Both are fire, and I didn't really see them drop at very many places. I think Kith had them, and maybe Essence had them, but kind of like double taps where only a few retailers get them. In terms of skips, I skipped out on the Concrete Boys, Air Force One. I don't listen to Lil Yachty, so there's no reason for me to buy these. I didn't even know he had a crew until it was announced on a shoe. All of a sudden, I'm Dr. Seuss and rhyming here. The last time I heard about the crew before that was when they kicked out Caribou. And, is it me that's out of touch? Usually I'm on top of these kind of things when it comes to music, but I guess the older you get, it really does slowly slip away as you just kind of revert to your favorites more often, and the newer, bands and rappers that are out there that are closer to your favorites. But at the same time, it's not like the Concrete Boys had a song of the summer or something where it was hard to get away from. So no, clearly it's the children who are wrong. But I don't think the shoe is bad or anything. It's a fine shoe. I like how the cut of the Air Force One here looks very different than the '07. So clearly he was trying to do something with these, and maybe they went into detail in one of those behind the design segments on Sneakers app or whatever. I also like how the shoe says it's us, but on the inside tongue tag it says Lil Yachty. So it's us, but it's me, not you. But like I said, I don't care enough about him as a rapper or personality to find out any more details about the shoe. But clearly, Nike likes Lil Yachty as a rapper and a personality, and much more than I do. So, Black Cement 3, I skipped out on those. I'm happy with my 2018 pair. That pair is exquisite, one of the best retros ever done. But these did release on a Nike Canada site, and there was a site-wide coupon for 25% off that worked on this sneaker, and if my size was available, I would have copped at 25% off. So I skipped out on the Black Cement 3s, I skipped out on these Air Max 95 Stash, and I skipped on the Legend Blue 11s as well too. And I'm going to talk about this as a whole segment later about OG sitting and what that means for Nike. And it's kind of meant to be like a check-in, not to be like an entire episode long segment or anything like that. For upcoming sneakers, I only want to talk about this Ama Manier Converse as part of the While You Were Sleeping collection. It's a Converse sneaker with a swoosh on it, and there's some talk about it. This has obviously been done before by some customizers and the Chinatown market guy. And to me, the only one that really matters is Virgil and the 10. Famously, Virgil wanted to put it on the Converse as part of the 10, and in the Icons book, the Virgil book that talks about the 10, he talks about how there was legal issues and he just couldn't really do it at the time. And so now seeing James Whitner putting a swoosh on the Converse, and I have a lot of questions on it, on why that's there. Is it a tribute to Virgil? Was the 7 meant to be like Virgil's the 10? If it's Virgil related, if it's a tribute to Virgil, I think that's fine. If it's not Virgil related at all, then I'm not a fan, and I don't think it should have been done. Even if it is a friends and family sneaker, in my opinion, the lore of putting a swoosh on a Converse belongs to Virgil, and now that Virgil is gone, rest in peace, Virgil Abloh. That's it. I think it should have been left there, and I think that the lore of Virgil and the story of him wanting to put it on the 10 should have been respected. And if the story of this James Whitner sneaker respects it, then I'm fine with it. If it does not, if it doesn't reference it at all, then I have a problem with it. I don't think it should be done, even if it is a friends and family sneaker and never going to release publicly to the wider audience. But I will reserve full judgment until they do the rollout on it. If they do a rollout on a friends and family sneaker, I don't know. But I will wait for the full story. I wanted to talk a little bit about making Sneaker of the Year lists, and there are some conversations about Complex's Sneaker of the Year list and even Bima Williams' Collab of the Year list. And there was a couple issues that came up with these lists. And one thing that I want to talk about up front was semantics. Sometimes there's always going to be arguments about semantics about the list. For example, is the AE1, which is a signature shoe, is that considered a collab or not? Or what's the difference between a collab versus a licensed shoe? The Powerpuff Girls Dunk is a licensed shoe, but the Wu-Tang Dunk, is that not a licensed shoe? Is that more of a collab? Most of the time, arguments about semantics I find very boring, and it doesn't really matter to me, so I just stay out of it. But for someone else, the wiring in their brain might not let them get past it, because it is clearly wrong and it's like a full stop for them. So semantics are often an issue in these lists. And then the other one that I've seen is about panelists. What does a panelist mean? Who is going to be on a panel? Is there going to be like an ESPN table where 8 people are sitting? Is there going to be like a Hollywood Squares thing where there's 9 people in a Hollywood Squares? For the Nice Kicks Awards, people were DMing me and asking me, when's the panel? And I told them, I just voted in a Google form and winners are going to be announced later. So that's all I know about it. And that's all it was. And the same thing happened for Bima Williams' list, his Collab of the Year list. And he did marketing ads, kind of pitting it as like the anti-complex list and even taking shots at them that, we have women on our panel and this is from the community. And I was like, yeah, talk your shit, Bima, put it out there. And when I actually watched the video, I thought maybe it's going to be like a Zoom call with the 10 plus people on it. Instead, it was more like like an entertainment show where he was running down the list and then cutting to clips of the panelists. And even that, only afterwards did I learn that Bima himself came up with the ordering of the list of the Collab of the Years. And he was actually asking his panelists to just contribute clips about their favorites. So again, some confusion there where when I was watching the marketing and the promotion of this list, I assumed the panel was selecting him, but only afterwards when people started criticizing the list and some of the panelists were basically saying, hey, they just recorded their bit and didn't really have any say in the order or anything like that. That's when I, heard that it was just Bima's list and it wasn't the panel's list. But some of this info was provided if you actually registered for Bima Williams' link, and I didn't register for his link. I just assumed that's adding you to a mailing list to watch content, and I didn't want to do that. I didn't feel the need to do that. And people might say you should do your research, you should do this, and it's a little bit too much for content. Even asking me to watch a 30-minute YouTube is rare. That's just not who I am. It's not what I do. I will listen to podcasts all day, but not watch 30-minute YouTube videos. So I consume content how I want to. And if I feel like I don't need to register and read emails, then I won't. But overall, it was a fine list. I didn't have any problem with the ordering of the list or the selections and the people that they used. That was all fine and it was all good. I don't want to make this that bigger than it seems. This is just my personal feedback and what I thought as I was going through consuming this content. And that's my personal feedback and a light criticism, I guess. And I'm choosing to do it here instead of telling Bima Williams directly because it's not at a level of a problem for me where I need to DM him and tell him all this. This is a person I've never had any contact with at all. So I'm choosing to do it here in the guise of a whole segment about making lists. And feedback and criticism, I will talk in more detail in the next segment. And of course, Bima Williams is obviously free to do whatever he wants to do. And, he's a marketing professional. He knows what he's doing. He wears a uniform. He wears the same hat and clothes. And that's probably all on purpose. The signing of a mailing list was all on purpose. And it was to grow probably his personal brand and then grow opportunities from that. That's all fine. He's free to do all that. I'm calling on people to do this, calling on people to create more content and things you want to see out there. So whatever his goal is, I hope he gets it. But on to the complex sneaker of the year list. There was a lot of discussion about this list as well too. And overall, I thought their list was fine. The list that they presented at ComplexCon, that is, because I think they've changed it to what they release on the site. Some of the stuff I thought was a little bit off, like the ordering. I thought J-Tips and Nigel's shoes should have been higher. And I didn't think the Kobe Girl Dad shoe should have been in there as well too. And it looks like on their published list, they fixed some of that. And some of the stuff, looks like they made it worse by taking J-Tips off. But otherwise, I thought it was fine. I'm known as a complex critic, I guess, but I really don't have an issue with a list where they have obviously put some thought on it and wrote about it and talked about it on a stage. So they kind of defended it. And sometimes they try to take a stand and say, hey, this is important, and try to speak for a wider sneakerhead audience. And that's kind of what their overall goal is. Like saying the Wu-Tang Clan dunk is an important achievement in sneakers, that it's finally available. Or even the Kobe Girl Dad was kind of, I think, on there because, Kobe's being generally available. They wanted to kind of celebrate. They did the same thing last year with the Nocta Glide and the Louis Vuitton Off-White Air Force One as like this top sneaker of the year, even though that sneaker was impossible to get for any normal person. But some of that stuff, like getting the Nocta Glide wrong and then taking it off, I will laugh at it, but I really don't have a problem with it if they put it out there, they defend themselves, they make themselves vulnerable to be laughed at. I think that's actually fine to do. And what I'm actually calling on people to do is to create content that they believe in. So as long as they defend it and they give their reasons or they correct it later, that's totally fine. And if they do get something wrong and they have to correct it, they do get a little bit defensive about it. And they don't really need to, because if you're wrong and the community tells you that you're wrong, you can just say, hey, we got it wrong, and you let us know. But as we've learned over the years, I have no say in how they operate or how they want to feel. And people criticizing the list, they don't really care how much work goes into making these lists and what you're thinking about, what audience you're trying to reach, the criteria you've given. They might not even read all those write-ups about it. So one person telling you that you got it wrong, that's just one person's opinion. A whole bunch of people telling you that you got it wrong, that's just valuable feedback. And that's, I think, in my opinion, the best way to look at it. But overall, that's what I'm trying to say here, is to embrace the debate instead of getting defensive about it. That it comes with the territory that if you're going to put a list out there, people might not like it and they might react. And then you get in the trap where you're calling out people for engagement baiting and not getting it and not reading the instructions. Whereas if you just embrace the whole thing, then it's like, yeah, thanks for reading. Thanks for taking the time to read it. I'm not trying to tell them how they should do things. I'm just talking generally, because I do this myself. I make my own lists and I put the sneaker bracket out there, and people have problems with it all the time. But since the very beginning, I've always said that is the entire point of this whole bracket. I've always posted a disclaimer saying, hey, the point of this bracket is so we can have some fun, maybe even get mad about it, because these lists are subjective and arbitrary, and we're doing our best to put things in a certain order. And then there's going to be some voting, and you might not like the voting. Maybe your favorite shoe gets in a bad matchup, or maybe it just lost in the voting when it shouldn't have, or maybe it didn't make the cut, in which case it's my fault because I didn't seed it in the top 64. And I always respond with, hey, you're welcome, buddy. We accomplished something here. We all got to do something and feel something and then talk about it. Thank you for taking the time to do the bracket, and please come again is what I can usually respond with, because that's way easier to respond like that than to get defensive about it. So that's just my opinion on how to approach these lists if you're making these lists, and even if you're given feedback, because it's just your personal opinion, man. Like everything is subjective. There's no one trying to set an agenda. It's just people trying to have some fun, trying to collect the year as it is normal to do at the end of the year, to kind of reflect on the year and what was good and what was not good and what was underrated and all that jazz. But sneakers are not a monolith. One list does not rule them all. One person doesn't speak for everyone. And that's why I always say I don't like the concept of a sneaker mayor, of someone trying to speak for a lot of people. So in the same vein, one media outlet doesn't speak for all. That's why that media outlet's sneaker of the year list does not speak for all. But a few points that I've touched upon in this segment about giving feedback and giving criticism and hating on lists. And I want to talk about that in this day and age of fandom and tribalism in sneakers. So back to ComplexCon weekend, and at that panel where there was that squabble between Lil Yachty and the aforementioned Bima Williams. And a very short recap of it is that Bima Williams had put out a video about the Lil Yachty's Air Force One and took some shots at Lil Yachty, saying, this is a guy who hasn't listened to some classic albums like Reasonable Doubt and the Black Album. And so can he really be rap's biggest sneakerhead? He said something like he probably thinks Wu-Tang is a hot sauce or whatever. And so the rest of the video after that was him just mildly criticizing the Air Force One, that is just plain white, that he is not doing enough with it. And that is like the mild criticism. Like it's barely anything. It's people don't want a white on white, so maybe you should have did more. But the first part, I think, is what unlocked this whole can of worms, because he opened it with taking shots directly at Yachty about his music know-how and not being a big sneakerhead because of that. And so on stage is what you got as a result of this. And I think Lil Yachty even talked about what I mentioned in the last episode, that he was upset that a black man was taking shots at another black man, that he kind of broke the code by doing that. But then Lil Yachty took it a little bit too far and started using homophobic language and such. And, seeing the clips, I was kind of thinking, I was like, wow, no one's really calling him out for using this language. Am I just too woke? And did not have full context of what was said. I'm only going by like these 45-second clips that were on Twitter. Once I saw the full clips, I saw that Brenda Dunn did actually say something in the moment a little bit later. But it really showed to me that, generally, culturally, especially in the US, that the tides have turned a little bit since the recent elections and just how everything is these days. But that's a sidebar. So I bring that all up because Beema Williams gave some mild criticism, but before that, he delivered some sharp personal attacks about him maybe not being representative of a rap sneakerhead if he doesn't listen to certain rap albums. And after that, Lil Yachty did not care or did not want to hear any mild criticism after that. So how you say things and the order you say things really matters. If you're being mean first and then mild later, people only remember the mean part. But also the medium matters. The medium is the message, as like a famous essay once said, that the medium that you use is just as important as the message that you're trying to convey. So the format here was an Instagram reel with Beema Williams' face and the video showing images of Reasonable Doubt and the Black Album and Wu-Tang Clan hot sauces and all that kind of stuff. So that, I think, matters just as much as what he was saying and how he was saying it. And I was thinking about that compared to, say, how I give criticism or how I say things, either taking direct shots or indirect shots. And I talked about this in the last episode, where if I say it on my podcast, it's one thing, but if I made an Instagram reel with my floating head on it with visuals, then that is very different. And I bring this all up because there's been a lot of recent criticisms and fights over criticism in the sneaker community. There was, of course, the Sneaker of the Year list, the Complex one, and even the Beema's Collab of the Year list about the panelists and stuff. There was a fight on Twitter about the Kith Sesame Street drop. A friend of the show, Davon Frame God, said something along the lines that shit is just too kiddie and can't believe adults would wear this. I think that's fine to say if you want to say it like that. I personally don't really care that much if someone's wearing an Oscar the Grouch t-shirt. But then later people were like fighting about it, that no, actually Kith is really good. And if you don't see that, you don't know what you're talking about. And since you can't dress, you can't criticize Kith. And on sneaker Twitter especially, you'll see this all the time where tribes go to war, where there's sniping back and forth. They're either defending a person in the tribe or they're defending a brand that they like. And that brand probably doesn't even know that they exist. And one day you might venture into one of these tribalistic wars going on Twitter especially, and you might not even understand what's going on, what's been said, who said what the backstory is, who knows who in real life, who's got beef with who. Like, say, if you were to draw a connection map of all the people who have a problem with each other and who's aligned with one another, who doesn't like each other. And then you mix in like who's been seeded by who, because that colors certain opinions on brands and such as well too. And then people start making arbitrary rules along these tribalistic lines that if one person is out of line, then everyone must speak out or kick that person out of that tribe. Then you have to consult this map or this chart whenever you want to then give feedback or talk about anything. Like, it becomes a lot of nonsense and it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Obviously, I'm not above some of this stuff. I've partaken in some of this as well too, in terms of mild criticism and over the line criticism, as the last episode kind of detailed. But really, I'm trying to learn from that. What have I learned and how can I change? And then how do I not get into a tribalistic war all the time? Because this is what I've been thinking about, that this is where things are just headed. And it's going in an uncomfortable direction. And what can I do and what can I say to not even prevent it? I don't even think I can prevent it, but just how can I operate within this? Obviously, I think fair criticism is fine and actually very much necessary, that no one is really above criticism and it shouldn't be normalized in the community that people are above criticism. But as I've learned over these last 2 episodes, how you deliver the criticism matters a lot, both the words that you use and the medium you choose to deliver it in. So let me give you an example here where I'll try to be thoughtful and fair and very careful about how I say things. But even then, even if you're trying to be fair, you might still face like this tribalistic pushback on it. So I'm going to use J-Tips as an example. And he's someone that people really like. He's got a lot of fans. He's from the community. He's of the community. But is he above criticism? I don't think so. So this is just for an exercise, and some of these criticism about J-Tips I've probably already made in previous episodes. I'm just using it here for the overall point I'm trying to make. So number one, he had a lot of shipping issues with his to-do list shoe. People were getting pairs a month later, or the tracking was not moving, or they didn't get them at all, or they would email customer service and customer service would not respond at all. Obviously, some issues happen with shipping, and sometimes it's not even in your control. And I talked in detail about this in my collab series. So I'm not trying to see it from one side. I could see it from both sides in this case. That feedback, I think, is fine because, in the past, people have downgraded releases on their end of the year list because the release didn't go as well. And so I think this feedback is something that J-Tips can improve on and grow from for the next releases, because after all, I think the majority of people, the majority of sneakerheads are still cheering for him and still want to see him succeed. So this feedback, if I say this on audio podcast with all that context and looking at it from both sides, that's one thing. If I say it in a short tweet and I'm mean about it, that could be very different. That could be someone all of a sudden tagging J-Tips and then J-Tips seeing it and being upset about it. Or it could be fans of J-Tips along these tribalistic lines are then have to shut me down for criticizing their guy. And then do I have to get into the point where then I'm looking up the person criticizing me? I'm looking at the connection map of who this person is. Is it just some random fan? Is it some other influencer person who then actually did get seated by Saucony sneakers? And now this tribe is coming after me because I've made this mild criticism. This is how things can blow up. And that's just the state of things as it is right now. And in this example, indirectly, Saucony would have got a critic shut down, and all it really cost them was the wholesale price of a sneaker that they shipped out to an influencer, who then formed the Saucony tribe and then went out and attacked people who said anything bad about their guy or their brand. And all of this could possibly occur without Saucony even knowing about it. And so, if they are aware of this, they can then go out there and weaponize it even further. They can optimize the algorithm. Number two, the Saucony Matrix shoe that he came up with. That shoe to me is a bowling shoe ugly. And that's not even a J-Tips criticism. I just think that silhouette is ugly and I would never wear it. But because J-Tips dropped a sneaker using that silhouette, am I now taking a shot at J-Tips? Maybe that person in the previous example thinks so, because they're following their tribalistic lines. And with that sneaker, the sneaker was called No Shoes in the House. The campaign of it was called. And to me, that was very similar to Joe Fresh Goods' No Outside Clothes. It's not exactly the same, but it's a little adjacent, the campaign theme itself. Is this fair criticism? I think so. But if you consulted the chart that I was just talking about, you'll see that Joe Fresh Goods and I are cool. And he was a guest on the show. And so along tribalistic lines, would someone now try to create a war between Joe Freshgoods and J-Tips because I said this? Does that have anything to do with the criticism? Not really. But you see, the format that I used to deliver this criticism was an audio message. It was not a tweet. I did not tag J-Tips and say mean things about him. Obviously, if I do that, I'd be escalating things and I would be prepared to get a response if I did. If I made an Instagram reel with my floating head and pictures of the two campaigns side by side with like real images and a transition and everything, then I'm escalating things. And that's what Beema Williams did with his little Yachty criticism. And that's why things escalated like they did on the stage that day. But again, I just want to state this is all an example for this whole segment. And all of it, even if it is criticism and feedback, it's still mild criticism. I don't feel that strongly about it. And even saying this disclaimer, I'm still envisioning a future of where, say, sneakers are bigger again, say things are still getting aggregated and blown up and out of my control, or someone takes a clip of this, the over under account, or just fresh kicks or kicks finders, or whoever takes a clip of something they find interesting and it blows up more than it was originally intended. And also, I've been using Twitter as an example because, people are saying Twitter is toxic. We got to leave that place. We got to go to Blue Sky. And once Blue Sky hits a certain critical mass, the same shit will just happen there. So I bring all this up because it's becoming a little bit harder to criticize in the age of fandom and tribalism. And you really do need to consider the medium that you use when you deliver this kind of criticism. And this has not normally been a thing in sneakers, but times are changing in this digital age, and tribalistic fans are often citing anything they can as a point for their side. They're cheering for things like marketing or sales numbers, and Drake has awesome sales numbers, therefore he's the best. Another example of this is late night TV, the old days of late night TV. Jay Leno on The Tonight Show always had the highest ratings and was the most popular, but he was the worst late night TV host, in my opinion. Conan and Letterman were way better than him. And of course, I'm realizing this is a very dated reference. It doesn't really matter anymore. But what I'm saying is, in that example, the numbers don't tell the whole story. Just because someone is popular doesn't mean that they are technically the best or critically the best. But along tribalistic lines, that number is something you can point at. That means they're the best. And you will use any arrow that you can find to throw to the other side. And as I mentioned with Kendrick versus Drake, we obviously saw that in that rap war as well too. And there's theories and threads, and Kendrick is the better rapper, but Drake is more popular, therefore he's better. And there's this whole narrative out there. And is this narrative even real? Does it feel real? Or are companies amplifying it? Are they paying for PR? And then is that PR using social media bots to create this narrative and change the narrative? And there's lawsuits out there basically saying that that's what's happening. And that's Drake's lawsuit against Spotify and UMG, basically saying that these PR firms are using these fake bot armies to automate a lot of stuff. And Atlantic Records is another music group that's been accused of using bots for fake streams. And even Spotify has been accused of using fake artists so they can reduce the royalty payments to real artists. And this is not just happening in music as well too. This is happening in a lot of industries that have fandoms where tribes form. This is happening even in pro wrestling, with WWE being the number one pro wrestling group, and AEW, which is like this challenger up and coming brand. And WWE has been accused of using bot armies and also using media members that they favor, that they're connected to disparage their competitor and win the perception war in this industry. And lastly, the most recent real life example of this was this Blake Lively lawsuit against her co-star Justin Baldini of a recent movie that they starred in, where there were some allegations from Blake Lively to the co-star, and then the co-star Justin Baldini is alleged to use a PR firm, which then basically orchestrated a smear campaign against Blake Lively using a bot army of social media accounts on Instagram and Reddit and Twitter, basically creating threads and theories about Blake Lively, talking shit about her, with the whole goal being to change the narrative about her and plant these stories and win the perception war before these allegations came to light, I guess. And it sort of worked. I remember all these stories about, she's mean to some interviewer going out. And I remember seeing on the For You tab all these like threads about Blake Lively all of a sudden. And then they all went away. So my warning and the reason for this whole segment is that this world is coming. It's coming for every industry that has a fandom. So it's going to come for sneakers eventually. And it's already been creeping in here in the form of seeding sneakers to a wider collection of influencers, even smaller influencers. And then assuming those influencers will then be in your tribe and then go out and fight for your tribe. And what I'm saying is what's coming next is the PR version of these bot armies where you could say disparage your competitor, disparage the other sneaker brand, disparage another collaborator who may have like beat you out in a New Balance deal or whatever. maybe even to disparage your enemy on sneaker Twitter. So that's my warning to everyone listening, that world is coming. I'm almost sure of it. And it'll come for every format. It'll come for Twitter. It'll come for Blue Sky. It'll come for Instagram comments. It'll come for Instagram Reels, podcasts, YouTube videos, because the medium that you use is as important as the message that you're trying to convey. So how can we fight this? How can we counteract this? And this is something I've been thinking a lot about. And what I've noticed is people counter it with positivity. Like, we're just going to do only positivity, and that's all we're going to talk about. Or they do the exact opposite. We're going to go into full on negativity and grifter mode and bad faith arguments and tribalistic lines. And nuance doesn't sell as well. And that's where I have a problem with it, because that's what I do. I try to be nuanced about it, try to be thoughtful about it. I'm not overly positive. I'm not overly critical. I dabble in each, but I try to be in the middle and distribute it fairly. But I'm finding it harder to inject nuance into conversations on Twitter and other places like that, because I don't want to fall into a tribalistic war. Especially if I learn something halfway through, especially if these people know each other in real life and I don't know the full story, it's better, especially on social media, to just stay out of it and revert to the medium that you prefer. In which, in my case, that's why I said I'm thankful for this outlet, that I have this here to where I can do that. And this is not a content creator thing at all. This is meant for anyone, any sneakerheads. Other sneakerheads don't have a podcast. They don't have something else that they can revert to. So they would go elsewhere. They would go to Blue Sky and Instagram comments or YouTube comments or wherever their tribe is. And that's why I say that fandom is changing in this current digital age that we're in these tribalistic wars that can form. So I've been thinking a lot about the medium and the message that I want to use. And this has come up with my end of the year top 20 worst in the year in the world of sneakers threads that I do on Twitter, where I recap everything wrong or dubious and dumb in the world of sneakers. And I've been thinking about, do I still want to do that on Twitter? Is it going to start some sort of war? Are people going to understand the nuance that is just kind of taking the piss, as I like to say now? Like, say if I say number 13 is J-Tips and his shipping issues, do I want to take that fight to Twitter? Do I want to criticize him in that format on that medium? Is it gonna start some sort of tribalistic war? And really, for what? Like, I don't really gain anything from it. I don't even feel that strongly about it. And I might be accused of trying to get, engagement and Elon bucks. And, you get like $11 from that. There's not really anything to gain. All you would get is some exhausting confrontation. So, I'll probably still do the list. It's still meant to be a fun list. So I think I can still take a little bit of the edge off. But really, I'm still thinking about how to approach it. But as I mentioned, this all sounds exhausting. It's meant to be exhausting. That's a tactic in a tribalistic war, in bad faith arguments. And if you play by those rules, you're then just spun around in circles. So it's better not to play by those rules. It's better to be more conscious of the message you want to convey and the medium you want to use to convey that message. And, I don't want to consult some sort of map before I tweet. I don't want a bot army shitting on me in replies or bombing my tweets and things like that. That is a real thing. I've seen it on Raf Kicks, for example. He had some war with someone, and all of a sudden all of his tweets are bombed and quote tweeted with private accounts. And I guess that bombards him with notifications, and the signal to noise ratio is way off. And the only way to counteract that is to go private. And by forcing someone to go private, you've essentially silenced a critic. But again, a bot army or something is being used, and my warning is that world is coming and it's expanding, and we'll probably see a lot more of it soon. So what I can control the medium that I'm using. I have this outlet. I'm very thankful for this outlet. I'm thankful for everyone who listens to this outlet. And if I want to say things here, I can give it the full kind of critique and context. And it's most likely not going to be taken out of context. But as I said, it still could be. And as I've been talking about, I can also control the words that I use, how mean I want to be. And I try to do this, and I try to be reasonable and fair in my mind, and I don't always succeed, as the last episode showed, because there might be some sort of past grudge that's either holding me back or steering me in a different direction. And really, this is the same kind of thing as a tribalistic war, I guess. And so, if I want to counteract these tribalistic wars, I'm kind of realizing that I need to let some of these wars go. So, that is why I'm officially ending whatever beefs or feuds or issues I may have had with anyone in the world of sneakers. I'm ending my feud with Complex, with Hidden New York, or anyone else for that matter. I'm just going to stop carrying this grudge around and not let it steer the direction of the things that I want to say. I'm letting it go on my part because that is the part that I can control for myself. I can't control how others feel. I can't even control if they hear this. And it's possible that they don't even think there is a war going around. They just think some idiot on Twitter talks shit about them once in a while and they don't even think about me. Or they do have the same grudge and war against me because I talk shit about them. And all they remember is how they felt when I talk shit about them. In the last episode of this podcast where I talked through the issues I had with the editor-in-chief of Complex, Aria Hughes, that really was a form of therapy for me. Just putting it together, editing it, finding out where I was wrong on things and where I might have been right on things and how I said things and the medium that I used on podcasts and tweets and stuff like that. So it really was a form of therapy for me. I learned a lot from it, and it really opened my eyes that I don't need to carry this grudge around with Complex anymore. My issues with them often just came from the changing nature of journalism and how I perceive it and how I think they should operate versus how they actually do operate. So in my mind, I would criticize them in that way, in the journalistic way that I felt was fair, and I might get a response that I felt was unfair, and then I'm upset that I got an unfair response. Like, how dare they? But of course, I do recognize that I'm the one that started it, and I can't control if someone responds fairly or unfairly. I can't control how they operate as a media outlet, how they make their lists, how they get defensive about things, or how they respond if they want to respond. All I can control is what I want to say and the medium I want to say it in. So my feud with Complex, I'm officially ending it here. And as I said, I don't know if they'll hear this. I don't know if I need to reach out to them and tell them directly, or should I reach out to some mutual friends to pass it on? Like I said, I don't think they'll ever listen to this segment and get the full context behind this all. Maybe I'll email them as an olive branch. I don't know. Maybe I'll just leave it and let it marinate. I had an interaction with Matthew Welty on Twitter that may have been an olive branch, but it really wasn't my intent to be an olive branch. This happened when I saw a tweet from LA3. He referenced an article by Matthew Welty called 2024 was the year that the sneaker hype died. And I clicked through and I read it and I thought it was very good. And in a reply to Matthew Welty, I just straight up said, nice work on that article. Good takes on the year. I didn't feel the need to qualify it or anything else about it. It was just a straight up compliment that was genuine. That's how I felt. And as I said, the things that I've been trying to say in this whole segment, I've been thinking about for the last month and a half or so. And so that's why I was like, it was good. So let me just say that it was good and not let the grudge steer me in the other direction. And he responded, and he didn't need to respond. Sometimes people don't read their tweets or anything like that. And he quote tweeted it and said, I didn't see this happening before the end of the year or anytime soon. I guess Christmas miracles do happen, end quote. So maybe that is the olive branch here that I could reach out to him. Like I said, I don't know. I'm still thinking about if or how I need to do that. I was even thinking about going to ComplexCon next year in Vegas, and Vegas is a draw, so it's much easier to go there for these kind of events, for me at least personally. But I wouldn't be going to wait in lines for sneakers or merch. I can get sneakers and merch, and often it just drops online later anyways, like the Travis stuff did. And I'm definitely not going to see Daniel Arsham, who's the host next year. I don't give a shit about Pokemon, and I don't really believe that he does either. But I'd basically be doing it to see my online friends, that I need to do this before it's too late, that I've put it off for too long. And so convincing my online friends to go to Vegas to ComplexCon on that weekend, that might be another task entirely. But again, Vegas is the draw. Vegas makes it easier. So the other thing is, I guess I should find out if I'm even welcome to go there or not. I don't want to buy tickets and then I'm kicked out because of things I've said in the past. I'm a changed man as of 4 minutes ago, officially. So, as I said, I can end the feud on my part and clear any issues, but that doesn't mean it's over on their part. Like a lost Japanese World War II soldier in a forest, they might think the war is still on. So, there's still a bunch of things I got to figure out. I got to think through some of this. I got to figure out if I want to extend an olive branch. I got to figure out if I can go to ComplexCon next year and convince my friends to go. So there's work to do, but to look on the bright side, Mr. Brightside, I have figured out a lot of stuff recently. And honestly, letting this stuff go, it really does feel nice to let this kind of stuff go, that I don't need to carry this weight or grudge around. So overall, I wish I had better answers for this fandom versus tribalism thing. I think it's just been brewing and it's been rising a lot in other fandoms in other industries, and I think it's going to come into sneakers and expand. A sneaker boom could be right around the corner, and it could be very different from the ones that we've seen in the past. But it's not completely hopeless. If you are a fan of a product or a brand or anything, you could still be a fan and embrace it. And if you still want to talk about that fandom online somewhere, all I'm saying is please consider the message and the medium that you use, and both are very important. And the other thing I'm saying is if you don't want to be into tribalistic wars, then you have to learn to let things go if it is a thing that you can let go. Some grudges get to a point where they can't. I understand. But if you can let them go, and if you do follow some of this other stuff, you can get to the point where you enjoy it, where you can give nuanced takes, and you don't have to consult a map of connections and tribes. But the most important thing that you can do is you can go fuck yourself.